Hey guys, it's Landon Blake with Redefined Horizons, and this is, I think, the last video that I'm going to do showing you an example of how to do the first four types of notes that we put on boundary survey maps at RH. So in the last video, I think we did a joiner notes. In this video, we're going to do an example of a boundary resolution note. All of these examples have been from the same survey. So it's this survey that we did down in Gustine, these two parcels, and we're going to go through the boundary resolution note in this video. This is what we call a type 2 note. In other words, it's the hard kind of note. It's not the easy kind. So you have to go through, in a type 2 note, you got to go through and identify how you resolved each piece of the boundary. So you're going to see how we do that here. So I've got the boundary survey open in CAD. I've got what we call our boundary line work drawing and our boundary annotation drawing opened up. And so I'm just going to go through these notes with you one piece at a time here. So we're going to start with the north boundary here, which is these two segments, and I'm going to work in a clockwise direction. So if you remember from the video on the adjoiner notes, we established these two lines off these two subdivision maps here using these found centerline monuments. So let's see what that note looks like. Okay, so the north boundary of the subject parcel, here's the note. The north boundary of the subject parcel, L1 and L2, so identify those segments, is described in R1 as running along the middle of an irrigation ditch. So I always try and tie in the first part of the boundary resolution note for each piece of the boundary. I try and tie back to the reference document, right, which is usually the vesting deed. So I always try and start by letting the reader of the note know how was this line described in my deed. So in this case, this boundary, the north boundary, is described as running along the middle of an irrigation ditch. Now, the problem is the ditch is gone. It's not there anymore. Okay, so that comes from a very old description. So I just say that. Okay, so no evidence of the ditch was visible at the time of the survey. All right, well then how did I put the line back on the ground? So I say next, I retrace the north boundary of the subject parcel in this survey using record measurements on RX and RX. That'll get replaced with the reference number for the two subdivision maps and the found monuments, those centerline monuments. So couldn't find the ditch. Subdivision was in place. It was monumented, been there a long time. And I mean, if it's been there 20 years. That's the best available evidence I felt for the line. Okay. So in this particular case, there isn't a clear link between the monuments I held and the controlling column, the deed, which is the middle of the ditch. But if you go back and look at the chain of survey, you can see that in theory the subdivision map, the south boundary of those two subdivision maps were put at the location of the old ditch, and that's visible in the chain of survey. Now I could potentially put that on here, but I think I already talked about it in the adjoiner notes. And so you got to be careful about not having too much overlap between the adjoiner note and the boundary resolution note. Let me just read this adjoiner note. Yeah, so I don't see it there. So let's see if we can add a note that will just kind of encapsulate what I just said. So let me think about how I want to say this. I think I want to say review of the chain of surveys for the north adjoiners reveals the likely intent of RX and RX, those are the two subdivision maps, is to place the south boundary at the original location of the irrigation ditch. Okay, so it's in the chain. You don't always get that clear link, but if you go back a couple, 2 or 3 steps in the chain of survey, you can see that the location of the boundary on the subdivision ended up being, I think, pretty close to where the ditch was, although the meets and bounds in my deed don't fit exactly with the boundary of the subdivision map. All right, so that takes care of this north line here. Okay, north line of our parcel. Okay, then the next thing we have is the east boundary, which is a little tricky. If you remember from the adjoiner notes, we actually have kind of 3 different pieces. So we've got this piece that runs along the right-of-way of Jensen Road. Then we've got this piece that goes around these 2 carve-out parcels here. and then we got the piece that runs along runs along the highway 33. And so I just go ahead and break my note for my east boundary into 3 pieces. So I say here, the portion of the east boundary of the subject parcel identified as L28 and L23 is described in R1. The vesting deed is the west boundary of the county road. So I'm making that tie back to the vesting deed. Then I say, all right, how did I get these on the ground? They were retraced at the record right-of-way width of 20 feet from the center line of Jensen Road as defined by these monuments. Okay. Now in this case, I don't have a road deed that gives me the 20-foot width, although it is on the historic survey maps and the tax assessor map. I don't love that, but on a lot of these older county roads, that's what you get. There's not actually a road deed. Okay, then I say that next piece there is around the carve out. So it's around these 2 carve out parcels, and I had some issues here. These deeds don't fit really well with this quarter section line here. And there's a chain link fence here that doesn't fit really good either. And I asked for some chain of title work here so I could try and figure this out. And the project got killed before I was able to do that. So I just have to state the facts here. Portion of the east boundary identified as those 3 lines were not fully resolved on this survey. Lines shown are based on a translation and rotation of the existing measurements in the 2 deeds, the 2 carve-out parcel deeds, to the westerly right-of-way at Jensen Road. The measurements don't fit well with L29, that's that quarter section line, or the existing fence. So what I did is I took these 2 deeds, rotated them to Jensen Road, and there was a little overlap here with the quarter section line. It jetted over here 2 or 3 feet, I think. When I rotated to Jensen Road, the deeds overshot here, and then no matter how I put them in, they don't fit real great with the chain link fence. So this is just kind of a mess in here. So we're just going to say that. All right, so then we have that next piece, which is down here on the highway. Okay, and so you can see in our search drawing, this highway deed got put in right here along Jensen Road. So it got rotated along this right-of-way line at Jensen Road, and it got anchored here at the intersection of the canal right-of-way with the old county road right-of-way. So here's how we say that. Portion of the east boundary defined as those 4 courses are accepted from parcel 1 in R1, that's our vesting deed, as a portion deeded to the state of California in RX. Okay, so I'm making the tie back to the grant deed here, right? That line is the westerly boundary of an exception parcel to parcel 1 in my vesting deed, and it went to the state. Okay, so that's the tie to the vesting deed. Then I say these segments were retraced on this survey using record measurements in that highway deed, translated to the intersection of the easterly canal right-of-way and the projected right-of-way line of Jensen Road, and rotated to the westerly right-of-way of Jensen Road. So translated or moved to the intersection of the canal right-of-way with Jensen Road, and then rotated along Jensen Road. That's how I put the courses in. Okay, and it fit very well. Okay, so then the last line we have is this this line here that runs along the canal. Okay, that's our west boundary, and you can see in the search drawing that we were able to put that in with this survey map that we tied down here. Has that canal right away in it. So we say the west boundary of the subject parcel is described as the easterly boundary of the San Joaquin and Kings River Canal Reservation in R1. So I'm making the tie back to the deed. I say on this survey, the segments of the west boundary of the subject parcel were established using a record 200-foot offset of the westerly canal right-of-way line on RX, that record of survey. By the way, this line fit well with the existing physical location of the canal. Now, one thing I may want to add is, let's just see, I don't think our deed had meets and bounds along the canal. Yeah, it doesn't. It just comes back down the canal in both of these. Sorry, my wife's yelling at our dog in the background. So I might just add a note here. We're going to say in parentheses, the land description of R1 did not contain bearings or distances for the canal right away. Neither did the land description for the canal I'm just going to say the land description for the canal right away in RX, and that'll be the actual canal deed. So neither the canal deed or my vesting deed had meets and bounds for the canal. So the canal deed just says 200 foot along the existing canal. This guy actually came in and did a survey. It fits good with occupation. That's what I'm going to hold. Okay. And that's it. So we basically have kind of a triangular parcel, right? So we've got a north boundary, an east boundary with 3 segments, and then the westerly boundary. And our boundary resolution note follows that pattern, hopefully, that we did in the last bit in the video about boundary resolution notes. Again, this is a type 2 note, so we break out each section of the boundary: north, east, west. The east boundary has 3 subsections there, and in each one of those we tie back to the vesting deed, and then explain how that dog is in a lot of trouble. We explain how we put it on the ground. I'm so sorry for the noise. All right, at least you guys know my life is for real, right? It's definitely far from perfect, and I apparently have a very bad dog living in my house. All right, guys, I hope these videos help. I think that covers the 4 main types of notes that we did in the very first 1 or 2 videos. I may do a couple more videos on boundary survey map notes. I may do a video on what we call band notes. Those are the notes that we put in our bands. And then I may do a separate video just on the notes, the required notes for a record of survey here in California, the statements that we put on our record of survey. But there you go. I'm giving you guys our secret sauce for a good boundary survey. I think this is really important. I had a lady talk to me today a little bit about a boundary survey. And I told her, I said, she says, I'm checking around for the cheapest price. I said, yeah, I'm not going to be the cheapest price. She said, well, what makes you so much better than everybody else? Right? This is what makes us better, right? The fact that we do good work that can be retraced by future surveyors is important. So, all right, guys, appreciate you hanging in there with me, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments, or you can email me. And like I said, I'll probably do 1 or 2, maybe 3 more videos on some map notes.